start streaming, hopefully to the right place. Oh, sorry, you guys. There's people there. I made a little bit of mistake while streaming, so I'm just trying to make sure everything's going to the right place and that I didn't get too far ahead of myself. Uh, hey, everybody! Thank you guys so much for tuning in for the live stream today. Um, As you can tell, I didn't get all snazzied up for you. Just get the crazy, poofy, fluffy. You guys get fluffy hair. You don't get fluffy hair very often from me. And, and just my workout shirt, even though I haven't worked out in like 3 weeks. I haven't worked out since I've been in quarantine, so probably need to start that. Actually, I plan to start that back up Monday. Going into 2020, I'm working with a coach and I have a group of guys for kind of business accountability. And so we're using a system called 12-week year to kind of set our goals. And it's trying to get more done in 12 weeks than most people get done in a year. And so you kind of really focus in on that little window of time, have focus, and go in hard on it. So if you're doing a 12 weeks, that's about 3 months. So we just finished year number 1 in 2020, starting year number 2 in 2020. So one of my restarts for this new year inside of the year is back on my fitness stuff. So everything kind of went wacky whenever the world went bonkers on me. Or everyone went bonkers on everybody. And so I kind of went, all right, just going to refresh, rethink, come up with a new plan. And hopefully year number 2 will be a nice return to form. So after how crazy the world's been. Anyway, you guys have been dropping questions like crazy on me. Heading over to what you guys have to say. Gamerman X9000. Hi. Hello. Back to you. Rich reviews. So many indie titles to watch. So little time to do it. Very true, especially right now with South by Southwest's lineup just getting dropped on Amazon Prime. I mean, that's literally like 100, 120 movies. I don't know if they're all there. I don't know if I'm overstating that, but that's a ton of indie movies to check out. And, yeah, totally. Zeke, how are you, Sean? And then, like I said, along the same lines, Rich, for you. So, how is your day? I am doing good at the moment. Things started out today. I had about as bad of a start as you can get. Oh, that's not really true, but as heart pounding as a day can start without a hospital visit or the police showing up. I wake up to my wife screaming, "No! Stop it! Stop it!" I'm like, what is going on? Kids running, "Dad, Mom needs you, run outside!" And so I run, throw pants on, go outside. And basically our bigger dog, we have 2 dogs. One's a puppy that's a pit mix. And the other one is like a 90-pound lab. A 90-pound lab he's got a bunny in his mouth. By the time I get out there, Bunny's gonna die no matter what. But we're just trying to Bunny's in the mouth. He's locked the jaw. He's not letting the bunny out. He wants to eat his bunny. And we make any gesture to try and open the mouth. Maybe we get a little wiggle room. Then he closes it, and you hear the bunny squeak. We are not that family. We are not the cruelty to animal family at all. We love animals, and so the idea of a little bunny squeaking to death in my dog's mouth, and so we literally got a screwdriver and tried to pry the mouth open to at least let it die with some amount of dignity. And I don't even know, because obviously it would suffer to death, so I don't know what we would have done to try and kill it faster, but we failed at it. And eventually, trying to shuffle around, pulled his head around, yapped it up, and swallowed the bunny kind of whole, still alive. I mean, it was squeaking 10 seconds before he gulped it down. So, that is not a memory that I want in my head that I've now passed along to you. So that's how my day started. And then I guess it got better. I edited today's video. It's going to be... I took what I did for you guys as a Patreon pitched video for the month. Pitched my idea for Spider-Man 3. And I couldn't really do that. I don't really have a plot in mind. And instead went... with kind of 10 things I want them to do, and I did 10 things I want them to do for the Batman. I could have pitched a Batman movie since it has a bit of a clean slate. Could have done that a lot more, but the format worked. There was a hit video which you guys proposed for the Spider-Man one, so then did that with the Batman, and got that finished. Watched Onward for the second time in 12 hours since the kids watched it last night. We watched it again this morning, and now I'm here getting to talk movies with you wonderful people. Landon, hello from Minnesota. Hello, state of Minnesota. And Landon in the state of Minnesota. Lost my place. Rich Reviews, why don't they just announce that New Mutants is going to Disney plus Artemis Fowl is doing the same? So, I read an article yesterday that probably has the answer to that. So the problem potentially with this situation is that back about 8 years ago, Fox signed like an exclusivity deal with HBO, so that new stuff, it goes to HBO first. They have the exclusive rights to streaming. So right now, X-Men Dark Phoenix, obviously wasn't a big hit or anything like that, but a big franchise film. It's on a competitor's channel, and it would have gone to the streaming service. It would have gone to HBO after the acquisition fully. I mean, all clean. This is Fox X-Men is under the Disney umbrella, and then it debuts on a competitor. Why would that happen? Because of this exclusivity deal. So when I read that, I went, "Oh, that makes so much more sense of what's going on." I'm surprised. I don't know. Maybe the article was wrong. Maybe the article has been for bad information. So they're trying to have a scoop that's not real. But I'm surprised more people haven't been discussing that, if that's really kind of what's going on here, because it makes a lot of sense of why they wouldn't just drop it. Like if Artemis Fowl, the Kenneth Branagh Disney pick is getting dropped on Disney Plus, obviously, New Mutants should just go to streaming. And if that's the case, that HBO has this exclusivity for streaming rights, that makes a lot of sense. Majestic Demon, hey Sean, how you doing this afternoon? I just gave you the answer on that one just a few seconds ago. Dramatic morning with the rabbit being eaten alive in front of me. And now that's kind of a little bit better. Rich Reviews, Virginia is under stay-at-home till June 10th, but we don't peak till mid to late May. Work at UVA Hospital, and the hospital is now a ghost town. Yeah, it's such a strange time, because we're like trying to predict, like, how can we get the economy going back again while at the same time not knowing what exactly is happening with this disease. And we're just learning so much every single day, and like we don't even have a good idea of death rates, even the death rate in America, because there's a delay of when it got here versus when when people start dying. And then testing, there's a delay based off the amount of testing to get a good number as to how many people are actually affected. So it's really interesting to like just watch this thing that we will be talking about for decades. For the rest of our lives, we'll be talking about the time that this horrible virus crept across the globe and enormous numbers of people died and economies shut down, and it probably starts a new massive worldwide recession right now. So yeah, it's pretty crazy just to even think, like, and it's going to hit everywhere a little bit different. And will it hit as big eventually everywhere, or the fact that there is a bit of a delay for the rest of the country outside of the major cities to kind of amp up for things? Who knows? Majestic Demon, now that you're back on video making schedule, do you still watch random movies? Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm not watching very many movies right now. At least I'm not putting them on. Kind of intentionally, kind of not really intentionally. It's just kind of the way it's played out. I'm back on a schedule of making videos, but I'm not my normal schedule for videos is based off of new releases. So previously, right now, I would be thinking about, I got to get all the MCU movies rewatched by the time Black Widow comes out. I'm working to prep a big DC one for when Wonder Woman comes out, so it's 40, 50 movies. I would have been watching all the live action Disney remakes for when Mulan came out. And so it's the new releases determining this schedule that gives me this backlog that makes it difficult for me to watch random stuff. It's entirely because of the rankings. When I have ranking videos that are on a set schedule, that determines what I need to watch, especially to put them out as aggressively as I do, to rewatch movies, to make sure that they're not just kind of random thoughts. It has to, like, I just have to plan it out, and that determines what I watch. So it's not making videos. Like, you even look at what I put out this week, where there's some pretty big videos in there with the all the movies I watched this year, the Spider-Man one. I'm about to put this Batman video out. I didn't have to watch. The only movie I watched for these 3 videos was Spider-Man Far From Home to prep for the Patreon Select video from this earlier this week. But the other ones, it's just kind of my ideas, or it's stuff I've already done. But with a new ranking, I have to rewatch all those movies so it's fresh, and that's what makes it so. But I've been watching more TV. Watch Tiger King, the insanity that was that, and catching up on a few other shows. Watched Westworld. It's kind of more like, and I'm playing through the Uncharted games. So I'm just trying to do the stuff I don't normally do because I can, and there's no hold up on what I'm trying to produce because of it. So it's a little bit of refresher for me to kind of move out of the grind of, like, I just have to watch movie. David Patterson, your most anticipated for 2020 is going to be your 2020 list with a few differences. It's pretty close. It's not terribly far off. There's a few that still get to be released this year, maybe. There's a few that already came out, and then, yeah, at the moment, like, half of the list is the same. GamerMax 9000. The first Avenger is the most underrated movie in the MCU. That's a good, fun question to throw to you guys. What do you think is the most underrated movie in the MCU? Everyone, of course, has a different opinion. It gets a little bit tricky. Like, there's the obvious ones that everyone has up top, and there's the obvious ones that everyone has at the bottom. But that middle section, where there's a lot of wiggle room, what do you think is the most underrated of the Marvel movies? Like, for me, I don't think I wouldn't go say that, because I think it does have some faults. The stuff I love, I really love. It has one of the top 3 scores of the MCU. And Alan Silvestri, just fantastic. Superhero theme, but also feels like a war theme that also feels like a period piece theme. Great stuff in it, but the way they treat World War II and the main plot in general, I don't think is as strong as the origin story. So I think most people kind of have it in that middle ground. If someone has it in, like, their bottom 5, I'd agree with you. I think that's underrated. But for people that have it in that middle section, I think that's about right. And there's a lot of wiggle room in that middle section. Which one do I think is the most underrated? That's a little bit tricky, because I tend to, like, I'll usually, like, defend, and I'll say, like, the Incredible Hulk. But the Incredible Hulk is, like, bottom 4 for me. So on the one hand, it sounds like I'm saying, yeah, it's underrated. People need to give it more credit. And I absolutely believe people need to give the Incredible Hulk more credit. I also have it really low on my list, but I think that's a statement about how much I like the MCU. My low bar, the number that I actually think are, like, kind of bad movies is very small. It's like bottom 2, and then maybe bottom 3, and then everything else I think is a good movie that maybe is a little bit bland or anything like that, but they're 20 of them I really enjoy, have a lot of fun with. So which one do I think is the most underrated? I'm not really sure. Let me see what you guys are saying down. Let's see what we got here at the bottom. Majestic Demon, Hulk for sure. Well, not getting too many answers back. I don't think. So we can move on. Well, you got so many questions. Rich Reviews. So, how are you going to do the South by Southwest? I doubt I'm probably not going to do much of anything with South by Southwest. I go to South by Southwest for me and to meet up with people. It was going to be cool to me because I was going to spend the week with my buddy Griffin that I do the podcast with, Zach Pope. Us plus another guy. We're going to have a place we're going to stay together in downtown Austin. The best man for my wedding, he's at South by Southwest the whole time. Plus just all these people coming into town. So it was more of a networking, spend time with friends experience thing for me. That was what I was most looking forward to. I thought the lineup for it was terrible. Everybody that I know, all of us on our group were like, this is the lineup. Like, you're just seriously lacking things that pop. Whether a more interesting kind of the marquee bigger films to open and close, or just the stuff in the middle. I mean, it really wasn't a very good lineup in the first place. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Like there just wasn't much anything there that I was like, oh, I got to check this out. I mean, it just nothing piqued my interest. And if I review those movies on my channel, they're not going to go anywhere. So I wouldn't even review them. I wouldn't even put the content on my channel. And that's the tough part. Like I would do coverage. I do the coverage I needed to do to keep my press credentials because I was able to go for free, or would have been able to go for free. But beyond that, it's tough because just the lineup was just nothing that popped from my audience, and nothing that even really popped to me all that much. And that's not good when you look at it and you're like, what? Why don't you have anything? Like Fantastic Fest this last year, the film festival I went to, much smaller event, costs half as much to attend. It's only at one theater. People from all, it's not nearly, I mean, it's like a fraction of the size of the event. And the opening movie was Jojo Rabbit. The closing movie was Knives Out. The next to last one was Parasite. And then in the middle was a bunch of other, like, platform that just kind of came out on Netflix. A lot of people are talking about this movie VFW that I've been raving about since I saw it. A bunch of, that's this much smaller event. So maybe that's a better film festival for me. But even on even on the other stuff, like Jojo Rabbit, Knives Out, Parasite, were the other stuff that they had to bookend it. So anyway, I'm very disappointed by the lineup for South by Southwest, so I don't even know. Majestic Demon, now that there's a chance Tenet getting pushed back, I have way more time to finally watch the Nolan's other films. Yeah, I mean, you had like months anyway, so yeah, no, when you got, we're in April, May, June, July, because it's at the end of July. In 4 months, even if it keeps its 4 months, he's only got 10 movies. So you've got time to watch the Nolan movies, and they're Nolan movies, so you've got no excuse. There's only a couple of them that are kind of a little bit slow or tougher, like The Following, his original one that was made for like $10,000 or something like that. It's black and white. I can understand why that one's a tough one to watch. And maybe a couple of other ones might be slow if they're just not your thing. But otherwise, he's Nolan. These are like, he's making interesting, creative, big films with great actors in them. So you got to watch the Nolan movies. I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Ardish Vasudevan. I'm very sorry. I'm sure I mispronounced your name. Hi, Sean. Big fan of yours. What's your opinion on Deepwater Horizon? I think that it's a super underrated movie. I actually haven't seen it. Those Peter Berg, Mark Wahlberg films, I all the ones I've seen, I've enjoyed. They're so well done. I think Peter Berg is a very odd director because he goes back and forth between these very well done reality-based films or based on real events, and then he does just blockbusters that are bad and just kind of throwaway action movies. I actually haven't seen Deepwater Horizon, unfortunately. Rich Reviews, there is a documentary from Magnolia Films called Slay the Dragon, a film about people trying to get states to outlaw gerrymandering. Could be good. Gerrymandering bad. The whole political system's actually pretty bad. The whole thing's frustrating and disappointing that the people that claim to be public servants are really more committed to power than the public. David Patterson, I'm rewatching all of the Pixar movies now. Just watched Cars 1. I am watching Cars 2 after that, then Cars 3. That is a good order to watch the Cars movies. I rewatched all of those about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. Matt G, any rare movies you might go back and revisit? Like go back in... do you mean on my channel? If you mean on my channel, probably not. If you mean just rewatch them, sure. I mean, rewatch stuff when I'm in the mood to watch it. But on my channel, I don't think that me doing like a review of an older thing I'm more interested in draws much attention to it. Because when I do that, the video gets viewed by like 1% of my audience, 2% of my audience. So even though my subscriber base is 150,000 people as of this past week, thank you guys so much for helping make that happen. That's not really the way YouTube works. YouTube doesn't work that 150,000 subscribers equals every video gets 150,000 views. It doesn't work like that hardly at all. I haven't had a video get 150,000 views since December. And so most of my videos, like it's a good number of 10% watch it. So using my platform to like expose people to things via doing a review of an older movie doesn't really work. And I've had people be like, hey, can you review this movie to get more people to know about it? That's not really the best way to do that. If I do like a top 10 list of movies you should check out, I do that as opposed to a review, suddenly that video gets 10 times as many people to watch it because it's a more enticing title and they know what it is. It's a recommendation for some stuff. Like, you don't want to watch a review for a movie you haven't seen that you've never heard of. So that's more the way I think about it. Like, I do all kinds of videos on where I cover tons of stuff, but they're lists and they're rankings, and that's a package that people actually consume as opposed to a review of something they're not familiar with. Landon, how often do you update your Letterboxd movie list? I don't know, about once a week maybe. It's probably once a week, sometimes more, maybe a little bit less. Probably averages out to about once a week. I don't really I'm not a fan of Letterboxd. I think other people probably find it more useful than I do because if you're not looking to have a YouTube channel and part of your intrigue of what you're doing is revealing things through lists, it's probably really helpful to have a tool to write your reviews, write your thoughts, or whatever use you have for it. But for me, I don't want to publicly put all my thoughts out there. It doesn't help me if it's in an app on my phone because I'm writing all my notes for other stuff. So then I'm writing notes for myself for my videos somewhere that have my notes thoughts. It's written for the purpose of doing a script. I don't really script my videos, but the way that it's used as my notes for speaking. And so it just turns into doubling the work. So I don't really like it all that much. And so I don't use it all that much. People are always like, you should use it to do this. I was like, okay, yeah, but you just gave me a new job. And it's not something I really don't particularly enjoy. Matt G, you into documentaries at all? I mean, sometimes. I watch Tiger King. Kind of. It's a matter of the subject. Even in my free time, I'm frequently watching little YouTube mini documentaries. They're not real documentaries, but they're essentially documentaries made by YouTubers about movies, production, what happens, that sort of stuff. And it's a matter of the subject matter. But sure, I'm into documentaries. David Patterson, I've gone from Tarantino to Godzilla, back to Tarantino to Toy Story to Indiana Jones to Ratatouille to Cars. You are all over the place. Majestic Demon, when I saw that I have to wait a year and 8 months for Doctor Strange 2, my first thought was, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Yeah, if only it was that simple. If one of us was a wizard that could go back in time and probably wouldn't change the release date for Doctor Strange 2, instead we would try and stop some people from eating bats or whatever it was that led to this virus being contracted by humans and then spreading. If we could stop that one, that would be nice. Z, any thoughts on MCU Phase 4 getting pushed back? I'm disappointed that we have to wait till next year for Eternals, and Doctor Strange 2 is supposed to come out on my birthday next year. Now Shang-Chi is. Not really. Like, people have been messaging me, hey, do you have any thoughts on the whole Phase 4 getting pushed back? You should make a video about this. I don't have any thoughts on it. I've been saying on my podcast, on Twitter, everywhere I can, that I assume that everything's going to reshuffle. It doesn't change anything for me. It's like, okay, it's further back. That's disappointing. But that's just the reality of existence right now. That everything has been just put on pause for 3 months, 4 months, I don't know. But we're going to have this big pause right here. Hopefully there'll be a recession. There will be some sort of recession. Hopefully life picks up pretty quickly, though, because everyone can get back to work. They're energized. People with money want to spend it, and therefore they'll surge the economy a bit back once we can go out, hopefully. But it's just kind of the reality of things that there's this pause here. So I don't have any specific thoughts on Phase 4 just going and doing that. I'd have opinions if they said, we're actually scrapping this movie because, if there was something more to it, but when it's just a shuffle, that's just reality right now. I think almost all movie dates are shuffling because there's such a disruption. Obviously, the movies that are done and supposed to come out right now are pushed back to various dates. The movies that are shooting right now are put on pause, so they're delayed. The movies that are in post-production right now, the CGI companies can't go together. The post-production people can't meet up, so they're shuffled. That's a disruption of the whole process of everything, so everything gets pushed back, shuffled a little bit. That's what I'm anticipating happening. Zeke, nothing against Shang-Chi, but I prefer Doctor Strange as a character. Still excited, though. Yeah, and what's tough to know with Shang-Chi, or tough to get too excited about it when we haven't seen a trailer yet. We haven't seen the cast, we haven't seen the characters show up, anything. So it's generically, MCU has trust on my part, but, I can't get super excited about it when, I just don't know what it is. I don't know what it feels like yet. I don't know how it ties into everything. So I'm generically excited, but I know what Doctor Strange 2 can be. I've seen the character. I know I'm connected to the character. And then you bring Raimi into it and it's like, oh man, I'm excited to see all those things. I know what those are. Shang-Chi's a lot of question marks. Rich Reviews, thoughts on James Mangold still in negotiation for Indiana Jones 5. So I don't know if the key word there is still or if the key part is James Mangold in negotiations. So I made a video about the Indiana Jones 5 James Mangold stuff. I talked about it on my podcast, so I've elaborated on a good bit. As for the word still, I don't have any specific stills for it. General vibe on Indiana Jones 5 and James Mangold. Quick version, I'm not excited for Indiana Jones 5, especially now that it's delayed, because I believe they said it's pushed back to 2022. In the year 2022, probably when this movie comes out, Harrison Ford will be 80 years old. He was born in 1942. He turns 78 this year. He will turn 80 the year that this movie is looking to come out. And he's in great shape for most 80-year-olds, but he's not on those Sylvester Stallone horse steroids that make him just still look jacked in his 70s. He's not that guy. And the appeal of Indiana Jones is this handsome, intelligent man going off on these adventures, fighting Nazis. But it's kind of built into it that just like this, like every guy's kind of fantasy of being, when called into action, he can step up to the challenge and be brave and intelligent and strong and kind of through his wits make his way out of it and survive. That's like the fantasy escapism of it. And of course Harrison Ford, like even really all the way up until he's still looking pretty good when you kid Crystal Skulls and he was in his mid 60s, but he was a very handsome man in Last Crusade when he was in his late 40s. That's the fantasy of it. And so when you're talking about when he's literally, when they're filming it, 79 years old. And you hear conversations with me like he's not just super quick on his feet, energized guy. He's not super fit guy like Stallone. Just the fantasy's not there. So I don't know what the movie is. I don't know what the movie's going to be. All that said, James Mangold maybe Loganizing Indiana Jones is kind of interesting to me. Like, what if you do a story with Indiana Jones that's not trying to be Raiders of the Lost Ark, is not trying to be Last Crusade? That's kind of interesting. I don't know if I want that. I don't know what you would need to call it to distinguish it, to like that we're doing something different. There is some ideas in that is kind of appealing to me. At the same time, that's just not what the fantasy is. That's not what the escapism is of Indiana Jones. So, there's my take. I do have a couple videos where I've elaborated a lot more on that. Matt G, thoughts on new DC and Marvel comic book endeavors, Snowflake and Safe Space and DC Gotham High? I don't really follow any of that stuff. When it comes to comics, I follow them based off graphic novels. So, I borrowed a couple volumes of Batman Zero Year from my buddy Andy. Read those over the last few weeks or since being in quarantine. And so that stuff's kind of interesting to me. It's finding those best story arcs. I don't just kind of follow things, and some of it's because they do a lot of this stuff. They've really struggled to figure out how to get new people to read comics, and they don't want to just keep retelling the same stories, and so then it's kind of a weird spot when you're 80 years into the Batman and Superman mythologies and 50 years into the Spider-Man mythology, that they're in a tough spot. And so they're always looking to find what can we do now that's kind of relevant and piques people's interest, and they try and do all these event things and crossovers and intertwine the story so you have to buy from different places. They've just done so many things that just kind of alienated me and many other people, so we just buy the proven graphic novel storylines afterwards. So, even reading that I don't know what Snowflake and Safe Space are, but no matter which direction they take that, I just roll my eyes at it. Whether I can't imagine they're actually doing a conservative take, and the idea that it's liberal writers trying to poke fun, whatever they're doing. Like, I just go, what? Come on. Like, it even sounds, maybe they came out a couple years ago, but it sounds a little bit behind the curve. That was the big discussion 2 years ago. That's not really what people are talking about as much. Like, that language is kind of petering out a little bit. So I just roll my eyes at it, just hearing it. But I don't know anything about what you're talking about. But the idea of infusing that kind of very hyper-relevant social commentary into DC stories just sounds awful. Rich Reviews, thoughts on Dax Shepard, Edward Norton, and Charlize Theron wanting to do a Joe Exotic, a.k.a. Tiger King movie. I mean, I don't know if that's a real thing, if they're actually planning to do that, or if that's just a joke that they made. It's obviously a very fascinating story that lends like, if you haven't watched it, you'll watch the first one being like, all right, these guys are freaks. This is weird. And you're kind of like watching the train wreck and like kind of fascinated. And then every episode after that, you get into it and you're like, what? How is this possible that it's happening? And it very much does the Netflix documentary thing, or mostly documentary series things, that they show you something, you're like, I can't believe how crazy and weird this is. And then they end with something where you're like, wait, now it's a murder investigation? And you're like, mind is blown. And then you watch the next one, and then it's this, and what? It's this. There's so many. Like, the reason it's able to be 7 hours long and still compelling and bingeable is because there's 7 hours worth of like, what inside of it? Because I mean, it's legitimately arson, polygamy, assassin for hire, accidental deaths, and we're not even talking about the tigers. We're not even talking about the feud yet. Missing people, swingers. So and because it's so popular, it wouldn't surprise me if they made a movie out of it. There's any number of directions you can go with it. If they want to go with a more comical version, get David Spade. David Spade on his YouTube channel has been interviewing almost everyone he can from the documentary, and he's doing these little 15-minute, and he had some of the people that you hated from. He didn't get Carol Baskin. He hasn't gotten her because she doesn't seem to be wanting to play this game. But everybody else that's not in prison, they're all just doing interviews like crazy. Like people that you're like, that's a terrible person, and they're just doing interviews. So wouldn't surprise me. Rich Reviews. I recently finished a 4-part documentary series called How to Fix a Drug Scandal. Would highly recommend it. Zeke, halfway through Tiger King, I'm enjoying it, but my girlfriend hates it. Yeah, I mean, you've got to be able to just watch the train wreck and tolerate watching people behave badly and make terrible choices repeatedly. They're all antagonistic, so you're watching people annoy other people, and it just keeps escalating and escalating with the absurdity of what they're doing. So I can see where like a group of people are like, this is a bad documentary, and these people are just insufferable. If you're watching it, it's like a documentary to learn about animals or something. That's not really what it is. I mean, you are watching, it's a documentary about how a feud can escalate, but it doesn't necessarily make that entirely clear, and it tries to end on this note of like the poor animals. And so I could have interwoven some of that better into it, but I mean, it's so compelling just watching these people and hearing the story. So saying it's a bad documentary while being incredibly compelling, I just think is dubious. David Patterson, if you don't like it, that's fine. But saying something is bad that's so compelling and sparking so many conversations, I think there's a big disconnect there. David Patterson, I watched 1917 last Sunday, and it became the 3rd favorite movie of all time. That's awesome. Very cool movie experience. I really dug it. I mean, obviously, we saw my end of the year list, end of the decade list. But just, I mean, do you think the writers of Rick and Morty might add much comedy into Ant-Man 3? Not saying that it's a bad thing, but if they do, I feel like it would take away from certain things in the story. But I mean, first off, I've never seen an episode of Rick and Morty, so I can't comment on them. I don't know. People tell me to watch it all the time. I just haven't. Second, Ant-Man franchise has always been a lighthearted comedy series inside of the MCU. It's not it's certainly not it doesn't have the seriousness of the movies the Russos did. It is designed to be the comedy intentionally. So the idea of bringing in people that are comedic writers for it, that doesn't feel off to me at all. And it makes more sense than what they did with Thor Ragnarok, which in Thor Ragnarok, it had this Shakespearean royal family drama inside of it, and it did undercut certain moments of drama because they went for cheap jokes. That's not really what the Ant-Man movies are. If Ant-Man goes full comedy, it fits what the franchise is. So that doesn't make me all that nervous that it could go that way. Rich Reviews, have you ever seen the show Outlander? Not really, but yes. My wife watched it. So I've seen a bunch of it. She's explained a bunch of it to me, but I haven't watched it proper. It's, I've told you this many times before, kind of British period piece type stuff. That is not my thing. So it didn't naturally appeal to me, and just the romance of it, and even the softcore porn aspect of it is not one that I'm like immediately rushing out to watch. Majestic Gibbon says Hulk for sure, which means that I am like 30 minutes behind on questions. So I'm going to try and just cram through a bunch of these real quick. Rich Reviews, here's a documentary Netflix series, Watch the Innocent Files, about 8 people getting exonerated after spending decades in prison. David Patterson, I don't like calling movies underrated or overrated because I feel like it implies that people should like movies that they don't or dislike movies that they like. So I think there's a side to it that I very much agree with you. I always struggle kind of with that language that I don't like that. They're not ones that I struggle with. People always ask me, do a video on most overrated and underrated movies, and I go, I don't know how to do that. And some of it's for your reasons, some of it's for other reasons that I think it's very difficult to. There's a lot of stuff that's called underrated that has like raving fan bases. Like I talk about the movie Warrior all the time, and so in a certain sense, it's underrated because not a lot of people have seen it, but that's underwatched. The people that have seen it mostly have very positive things to say about it. So is it underrated if everyone that's seen it seems to like it, or is it underwatched? Those are different things. But I think there's different ways to kind of interpret underrated and overrated. And when people be like, Avatar's overrated. Well, Avatar has had an enormous amount of pushback. It made a ton of money. It gives you some award consideration that was very weird. But for the most part, if you just don't talk to people, most people aren't like, Avatar's the best movie ever. It's just a movie that a lot of people have watched. So they're tough terms to kind of interpret exactly what people mean by it. But I think underrated, there's movies that I think that I don't think telling someone you should like this, you should stop underrating it. I don't think there's any validity in that. But there are movies that their reputation, I think, tanks the experience. So there's a bunch of people that just like crap on the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. And I don't know if they've seen it in 15 years. I don't know if they've seen it in 10 years. It's just an easy punching bag. And there's things in it that I think are deserving of the hate. And there's a bunch of stuff in it that's actually kind of good. And so I think you're talking about a movie like that I think is underrated because it came out right when Ben Affleck kind of overstayed his welcome, did a bunch of really bad movies, and people wanted to pick on him, and he made a movie that had some things about it that made it easy to pick on him. So I think that's where I think there is some validity to that. And I think there's certain movies that when you say, oh, it's overrated, once again, you have that wave of popularity momentum for certain movies where like film Twitter has some groupthink. It has some film Twitter, film YouTube has some bully aspects to it. Like if you don't rave about Winter Soldier and have it in your top 3, people are like, what? What? How do you not have Winter Soldier in your top 3? And so there's stuff like that happens that I think people just jump on the bandwagon. There's absolutely bandwagoning. There's I spend a lot of time in this space and like I watch way certain people do certain things, and you can see people jumping on the bandwagon of loving something. I think that's where it is valid to say this might be overrated. But I think that's the context, the bandwagoning, or either direction, positive or negative. I said I was going to go quicker, and then I didn't. Rich reviews. For me, Captain America: The First Avenger is in the bottom 4, considering it's really a remake of the 1990 movie. No, like that's ridiculous. No, have you watched the 1990 movie recently? The 1990 movie is set in the 1940s for 20 minutes, and then it's set in the present day, and then he battles Red Skull while crossing America to save the president. It absolutely does have the plot, in the sense that Captain America's origin is that he was the skinny guy that gets the serum and the Red Skull is his rival. But his first mission, he's put on a rocket, he fails, and it's like 5 minutes long. He fails, he's put on a rocket, shot, and it's aimed at the White House. He kicks the rocket before it hits the White House. The future president watches this happen and takes a picture of him, and the rocket flies, crash lands in Antarctica somehow, or in the ice somewhere, not Antarctica, but up in Canada. Somehow goes 2,000 miles north, crash lands, and he freezes. And then it skips to present day, where he comes back. That is not the plot line of Captain America: The First Avenger. It's just not. If you don't like the movie, I'm not going to try and convince you to like the movie. But to say it's just a remake of that movie is just not true. And both of them they're just telling the story that's in the comics, which is scrawny kid, Red Skull, frozen. And the freezing in Captain America: The First Avenger is literally in the last 5 minutes, whereas it's in the first 15, 20 minutes of the one from 1990. So, no, I do not accept that reasoning. That is not legitimate. Zeke, most underrated MC movie, in my opinion, is Thor. Yeah, it's got Kenneth Branagh directed, has a nice sense of grandeur to it, and, people kind of write it off. A lot of Phase 1 people kind of forget a little bit, besides Avengers and the first Iron Man. Or they don't get the buzz and chatter and everything. But yeah, it's I want to make sense. Gamerman X9000. Mission Impossible 2 may be the worst Mission Impossible movie, but it has the best soundtrack of them all. Yeah, man, I had it. I bought it. I had it on disc and everything. Brought it right when it came out, and that was my era of angry rock music, and so then it was like right when I was buying music like that, and then there was a Mission Impossible movie with Metallica on the soundtrack, so I, of course, bought it and rocked out to I Disappear all the time. Rich reviews, we've been playing Final Fantasy VII. No, I've never been a Final Fantasy person, so jumping in at number 7 wouldn't be a great place to jump in. Then again, Final Fantasy VII came out 23 years ago or whatever, too, so, but I've never played through a full Final Fantasy game. I remember back in the day, I think it was Final Fantasy VII, the one that was on the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation. I don't remember what it was, but I remember going over to my neighbor's house and being like, this is the greatest game ever. But I never actually played it myself. I just watched him play. Matt G, I originally thought Thor 2 was okay, but on later viewings, it's just okay. Yeah, that's about right. And I think that's the thing about MC movies. People want it like, Thor: The Dark World's one of the worst movies ever made. No. If you think that, you just haven't seen very many movies. Because it's a competently made, bland movie that has a lot of issues, but it's bland. It's forgettable. That's not the same thing as bland, forgettable, and incompetent. And there's tens of thousands of wildly incompetent movies that are made every single year. So when people say that it's one of the worst movies ever made, and I get that a lot in my comments because obviously the kind of content I make, like, no. David Madison, I may have been able to watch at least one movie a day since March 13th. Very cool. Landon, imagine if New Mutants is awful. Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting just because it's like a horror movie in the X-Men universe. So I think it'll always have just a little bit of that spark to it of intrigue. I'm having a hard time believing that it's great, though. I'm not. That's not a hot take. That's not an interesting thing to say. But when you have that long of delays and they wanted to do reshoots and everything, it's probably just going to be like this mediocre, middle of the road thing. That's kind of interesting because it has mutants in a horror film. I can't imagine that it's going to make a big drop or dent anywhere. Rich reviews. Apparently, Call Me By Your Name sequel has been delayed. They're making a sequel to that? Rich reviews. Hopefully one year you can attend the Virginia Film Festival so we can hang out. Maybe someday. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, would love to be able to do more things where I'm out and about more. Not anytime soon, since the universe is shut down. David Patterson, I was looking into, I've been just looking into Comic Cons and things like that all over the U.S. and which ones I can go to different states and try and meet up with people. And it's a little bit tricky because I don't, like, if I knew that X number of people would be at an event, then it would make it worth it. But when you just don't know if I'm going to show up and it's like randomly I run into 10 people in the halls and that's it, that's not a good reason to travel somewhere. So it's tricky to figure out how to do all that. David Patterson, I finally watched all the Indiana Jones movies. Raiders and Last Crusade are both great. Temple of Doom was okay. Crystal Skull was trash. Majestic Demon, all of the Marvel movies that turned out badly. Which one should get another chance? In my opinion, Ghost Rider. Excuse me. Trying to think through my bottom 10 or bottom 20 or so. So I think Fantastic Four is a big one that we just haven't. We've had several shots at it that haven't worked. That's an obvious one. Ghost Rider's another one that it's like, okay, they just didn't get this quite right. And both of those are from that era before they cracked the code. Like, their comic book movies are a lot more consistent now than they were in the mid-zeros, where they hadn't quite figured out how to balance comic booky and serious and the look and stuff like that. And I think they've figured it out. There's a lot more information that we have and examples of how to do it right. So I think those are two obvious ones. I like, even like The Punisher, people, those movies weren't big hits. They didn't grab hold of people, but I don't think they're terrible. And we've had the TV shows. I think we've had some Punisher stuff that's actually kind of good. So I think Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider are the obvious ones. LKB TV, what is your church doing with live streaming? So they're not live streaming, they're just pre-recording. So they're just doing like an acoustic guitar with a cajon, few songs, couple singers, something like that, and then preacher filming in front of a wall, basically. That's kind of what they're doing to posting it on the internet, YouTube and everything. They're not live streaming it. We don't have the tech to do that well, and I don't think there's a good reason to do that. If you don't already have the tech to live stream, then it's probably just better to pre-record, because there's a lot more options you can do as opposed to live streaming when you're not used to it. Dangerous game. David Patterson, I have a rule for myself to rewatch every single Nolan film at least once a year. Not the worst rule in the world. Rich Reviews, here's an idea for a ranking. Rank the Disney nature films. That could be good if there's enough interest from people. Just to give you, besides the Dark Knight trilogy, I've only seen Inception, and that took a day or two for me to finish watching. It felt very slow to me. You're breaking my heart. David Patterson, Michigan, why don't you watch movies in one sitting? I have ADHD, kind of back and forth between the two of them. Bryce Bailey, hey Sean, have you ever seen the found footage anthology VHS? No, I haven't seen too many found footage movies. It's not a genre that I gravitate towards too much. Adarsh, sorry for mispronouncing it. Once again, I'll stop about this. Did you watch Altered Carbon on Netflix? What did you think? So I watched the first season. I haven't watched the second season yet. And I like Joel Kinnaman. He's one of these guys that I think has done some really good TV work that's got some attention. But his transition to movies, he hasn't gotten the best projects. And they've been ones that kind of nerd culture's picked on a little bit. So he kind of, I think going back to TV a little bit. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to. There's a bunch of ideas that I liked that maybe was a little bit too kind of, I don't know, too hard R and too much kind of trashy, sleazy sex scenes and brutal murder. Maybe a little bit too much of that. And maybe some of that's just, when it's a movie, I'm fine with that because it's easy 2 hours once the kids go to bed. But when it's a whole TV show, then it makes it tricky for me to watch it. So that kind of changes the way I think about some of that content when it's difficult for me to watch because literally I have to like watch it after everyone else goes to bed, stuff like that. So I trying to remember because I watched it when it first debuted. So that was a year and a half ago or so. So there's a lot of things I liked. I just didn't immediately. It didn't hook me as much as I wanted to. I didn't immediately connect with it. I was hoping for like a nice Total Recall, Philip K. Dick kind of vibe, except a TV show and obviously different ingredients in the mix. I didn't fully get as much of that as I wanted, and sometimes it's just my expectations. Bryce Bailey, thoughts on Creep Show from 1982? It was directed by George Romero, and I think it's his best. So I actually have very distinct memories of watching it in like the 5th grade with one of my friends late night on cable and getting a little bit freaked out by it because I'd only seen Leslie Nielsen in the Naked Gun movies. And then in it, he's this rich guy that kills Ted Danson. So why is he doing this? And so I was just like right at that age where it could actually freak me out a little bit and just like what if I was buried alive? What would happen? And then I remember the actual Stephen King segment where he acts and the green stuff shows up and it forms everywhere. And I have distinct memories of those 2 segments. I don't remember any of the other ones. I haven't. It's not a movie I've watched recently. I think I've watched it a couple times over the years. Obviously, this one time that I just recalled that just burned into my brain, and then rewatched the movie 10 years after that to like, I should actually probably watch this. So I don't have a deep any insights. I'm more just kind of that story anecdote to share because it's just been such a while since I watched it. Bryce Bailey, do you have a favorite subgenre of horror, psychological, slasher, supernatural, anthology, found footage? Not found footage. The ones that probably most immediately make me go, oh, I want to check that out are the maybe call it the stuff like You're Next, Ready or Not, maybe even throw The Hunt into it a little bit, but like People Hunting People that has a little bit of that action vibe to it. Or You're Next isn't necessarily fully people hunting people, but it's kind of like that the way it plays out, and it's home invasion with people tables have turned, but it's normally ones that feel like a blend of horror and action. More so than just guy going around kills people and then they're afraid of getting killed. I like more when the tables turn a little bit and there's the fight back. If I were to make a horror movie, it would be in that subject. If I were to make a movie, like if someone's like, I'll give you $5 million to make a movie, it would probably be in this genre that I'm describing. Some sort of home invasion, people are on vacation, and some group comes after them and they turn the tables on them. That's the stuff probably more naturally immediately lines up with me. But then, from there, when you think, what's my favorite horror movie and franchise? It's the Scream movies. It's slasher stuff. So I have a lot of affinity for slasher movies. That's the stuff that kind of grew up watching a little bit. Really enjoy the Conjuring 1 and 2 and what they did with those movies. But it's like that specific genre of haunted house stuff. I don't think most of those are very good. Even most of the Conjuring spinoffs are pretty lackluster. But there's really great stuff in there. So those are some thoughts. Landon, do you know why Matt Damon was not in Bourne 4? Because he's done with the franchise. And he said he wouldn't come back if Paul Greengrass didn't come back to have an idea. I mean, it's open. It's not like it's not a mystery. It's not like they were silent. Like, it's nothing like that. It's that Matt Damon really liked working with Paul Greengrass and what they did on the first 2 Bourne films. And so then once they finished, they felt like we closed it out. We told the story we wanted to tell, and we don't want to do another one unless we come up with a really good idea. The studio, however, was like, these movies just made a ton of money. Maybe we should do another one. And so that's what happened. And so they got the guy that wrote the previous ones or scripts on them, and I think it was the guy that scripted the previous 2 or something, and then he also directed, I believe, is what happened. And then they brought in Jeremy Renner. I burped there, so excuse me. Jeremy Renner, and so then they expanded on the mythology and everything. So I think that was all good, but I wasn't crazy about that movie. And then like 8 years later, Paul Greengrass was like, "Oh, all this Edward Snowden stuff. I think there's some interesting new stuff you could do with Jason Bourne." Matt, you up for another one? That's why I came back to do another one. That's the story on it. Ryan Green watched The Shawshank Redemption the first time. Can't believe I hadn't seen it before. It's a good one. It's a nice little film that's different. I mean, you start to think like what movies like The Shawshank Redemption, and just twists, turns, emotion, kind of all of it. Rich Reviews, there is a rumor that AMC might be wanting to file for bankruptcy protection. Man. Yeah. Some of that's where things get real scary to me in all of this. When you have like AMC and some of these, if they have to like shut down, not even, and I mean that just because of the economy, because it's not just going to be the movie industry. Obviously, it's going to be a lot of different stuff hit very hard. So, I mean, I sure hope the politicians can just stop with the crap and like, let's figure out some good legislation that can prop it up until we can get the engine going again. Or, if a politician, I mean, here's a better analogy. Politicians can find a way to push the car of the economy to the hill right in front of them so it can roll to the gas station. If we can get to the gas station, we'll be okay. But so long as we're in this thing where it's out of gas, it's tricky. So it's scary. Just Demon, have you seen the Titanic documentary on Disney Plus where James Cameron explains the production of that movie? No. I've seen a lot of documentaries on it, so maybe I've seen the one that you're talking about. I have not specifically watched that documentary on Disney Plus. Bryce Bailey, would you be interested in a young version, reboot, recast movie based off Star Trek Next Generation in the style of Star Trek 2009? Would I be interested in a Star Trek 2009 style reboot of Next Generation? Tough to say. I'm kind of intrigued by it. I think there's some complications because of the nature of the characters themselves, where Captain Kirk is a more dynamic character for a movie because he has a little bit of some rogue in him, likes to get in fist fights. And especially from the movies they did in the 80s, they really built out this idea that he goes against the rules to try and get stuff. And so they built him out to be something that Picard was never built out to be. So it's a little bit more difficult to, I think, it even built into the formula of Next Generation was no conflict amongst the crew. So I think it's complicated to do. So I don't have a picture in my mind of how you do that exactly. I think that's the tricky part. And even built into Captain Kirk, the stuff they established about the Kobayashi Maru, I think laid some groundwork for what you could do with the movie. And I don't think that's just, there's like some bar fighting stuff with Picard where he lost his heart, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I see it. So maybe. I don't hate the idea. I just don't have the picture in my mind. I'm intrigued at what you could potentially do with it. But, yeah. David Patterson, title for Indiana Jones 5, since it's being directed by James Mangold, Henry. Could be interesting. He finally accepts his real name. So many questions. Majesty and New Mutants is probably corner crying right now because it's being pushed back, delayed again. Very true. What's a critically acclaimed movie you wish you liked more than you actually do? Okay. So one I've been saying for several years is like La La Land. I didn't seem to like it as much as other people. Even Winter Soldier is a movie that people rave about. I just don't connect with it the way that they do. A lot of kind of serious drama films. I respect them more than I'm interested in actually watching them. That's just not I'm just not that person. So I kind of wish that I was better at a lot of that. And you can even see that in some of the stuff I do and don't gravitate towards. Some of that's based off viewership, but a lot of my viewership is based off what I naturally gravitated towards early on and built a reputation for. And like, I don't like sit around watching Martin Scorsese movies, Stanley Kubrick movies, and I don't watch the Godfather movies just in my free time. And I feel that a little bit. So I wished I could be a little bit more of that person, have a little bit more fine-tuned taste for fine tastes, but I don't as much. Zeke, I watched The Platform last night. I really enjoyed it, but it's a very disturbing movie. Don't plan on rewatching it anytime soon. No, yeah, it's a brutal kind of watch that's engaging, interesting story, but yeah, it is not an easy film to stomach. Pun intended. Landon, it's amazing how much the flick pick likes over the top. Yeah, it's we all have those movies that it's just like this quirky, odd thing that you just have a lot of fun with. And so it's the fun movie that you like to experience with people. I mean, I don't know what it is for my channel, but there's stuff on my channel that's similarly like goofy, cheesy stuff that I really like. Stallone and Schwarzenegger, things that makes Van Damme, Seagal. And, it over the top is an easy one to have as kind of your quirk, or not easy. It's a one that makes sense to have as your kind of quirky oddity one that you like, because it is this movie about a truck driver arm wrestling to gain custody of his son. It's such a stupid concept, but it plays it so serious that while being such an 80s product at the same time, that it's a movie that would only have been made in the 80s. So it lends itself really nicely to be kind of that odd, quirky one for someone to have. Landon Peterson, some of my favorite videos of yours is your older ones in 2016 about what's a bomb and what's the difference between a remake and a reboot. Yeah, I need to do more of that stuff. I've always thought about having like this educational almost segment on my channel of like, what does this mean? And actually discuss that a little bit more. So I did that early on, and I just kind of got out of the practice of it. And some of those were kind of successful videos early on for me. But yeah, I think that's so much of what's just frustrating about the discussion on the internet is people just throw these terms around without ever pausing to think about what they mean. Birds of Prey was a total bomb. Total bomb? No, it just wasn't. If you didn't like it, cool. Disappointing? Yes. Underperformed? Absolutely. Yeah, it underperformed. But bomb is not underperformed. That the whole reason we have these different terminologies is so because there's a whole spectrum of things that can happen. I mean, you have Avatar and Avengers Endgame, and then you have movies that cost $100 million that made $10 million, so they're just utter bombs and lost enormous sums of money. Like King Arthur from a couple years back cost like $175 million, opened to $15 million. That's a bomb. There's no way to make your money back. You're going to lose $20 million. Birds of Prey cost $85 million and made $35 million opening weekend. That's not what they wanted it to be up here. It's not what comic book movies normally do, but given its budget, it's not a terrible number. It's not a good number, but it's not a terrible number either. And so there's just a lot of things like that where just people use these terms, or knowing the difference between a reboot and a remake. A remake, you remake a story, you retell a story, you reboot a continuity or a character. Like it's pretty clear, like they're not tough words to know if you just stop to think about it, but people just kind of throw the words around willy-nilly. Yeah, so yeah, I very much have that as something I've always thought about doing more of those and just kind of have it. Majestic Demon, it's disappointing that so many exciting movies are getting pushed back, but at least Venom 2 is still holding its release date. Yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things going on in the world, that's not the one that's like... once you kind of accept I'm stuck in my home for a month, you kind of also kind of lose sight of that all these release dates that are kind of passing because I'm just stuck at home. That's more prominent on my mind than all this other stuff. And then once I'm able to leave my home, movies will be released again. So it's kind of this odd. I think about it more in those terms than any. Like I don't have any specific disappointments. It's just like this is the reality of now. I've only left my house in the last 2 weeks to go to the gas station to buy like milk and ice cream, and to go to the pizza place to buy takeout pizza. which is in itself is kind of the weird thing because it's like, okay, wash my hands before I go in. The door's propped open. Walk up, grab the pizza. Don't touch anyone. Put it in the car. Wipe my hands down with a towel. Wipe it down with it's cleaning everything off. It's like my pizza. Okay, I just wipe my pizza down with antiviral stuff. Okay, but that's more on my mind than necessarily any specific disappointments. Gamerman X9000, which season of Smallville is the worst, 6 or 7? I ran a bunch of polls, and these two are keep tying as for the worst. I don't spoil it because I haven't seen it yet. Okay. I can't spoil anything. The worst episode is in season 6. I think season 7 is maybe the worst season because I don't even remember it. But in season 6 had a couple things I really liked. That's where Green Arrow was introduced, and I liked that stuff. Had the first kind of Justice League episode. I thought that was good. And I don't think these are spoilers. I'm not going to say plot points. I'm just saying these things kind of appear. So there's some things that are good. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I just don't even remember season 7. It was just kind of like at this point in time where they just didn't know where they were headed. And season 6, I think, had a terrible plot line about what was going on with Lana and Lex. And then there's this episode. This is just the throwaway plot of the episode is that like a boy from Mexico shows up in Smallville, and police show up at Clark's house, and they go, "We saw a Mexican boy run across the street, and we think he might be an illegal, and so we need your help finding him." And so then Clark says something like he's talking to Mom and Pa Kent about wanting to help this boy that's an illegal. And he says, "I'm an illegal alien too." And I couldn't believe how bad it was, kind of how offensive it was. I could not believe what I was watching. It came out with 14 years ago or something like that. It was unbelievable. It was like they were trying to make a commentary about immigration or something like that, and in the process just proposed the most insane that the writing was racist because what they came up with, it was just bonkers. It was like built clearly people that had never stopped to think about the concept of like, wait, we thought that if someone in the middle of America saw someone that looked like they were from Mexico, they would immediately assume they were an illegal and call the police. That's what maybe I'm missing something, but like I'm in Texas, and that's just like the craziest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like is everybody, that's a very long rabbit trail. I just thought it was insane. That's season 6, so that's what you have to look forward to. But 7 is just totally forgettable, and it gets better with 8, 9, and 10. I thought it ended really nicely. It started well, ended nicely, but yeah, that 5, 6, and 7, I just thought they just lost their way. They're torn between Smallville and wanting to be Metropolis and having characters they didn't know what to do with. Anyway, Gamer X9000, another thing Spider-Man 3 must do is bring back the Danny Elfman score. Yeah, but they're not going to do that. They can't do that, I don't think, because, technically they could, but you just don't want to cross continuities. It gets confusing if you do something like that. So it would be fun to hear it if they could find a way to work some notes in. But if you've already got your own score, you don't, it's like going to have dinner with your ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or something like that. It's a little bit weird. Landon Peterson, in Captain America 1990, Captain America vomits to steal a car twice. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And it's also not terribly far apart in the movie. It's all right in this middle 20, 30 minutes of it where he does the same exact trick twice. Landon, Gamerman X9000. Have you ever watched Bates Motel? No. Gamerman X9000. Have you ever watched short-lived Birds of Prey series? I've seen some of it. I think I've seen 4 or 5 episodes. So I've never been like so in. I've wanted to watch it just to finish it, to say I've watched it, but hasn't happened yet. Oh, we are over an hour. So I really am going to try and fly through these. Justin Edelman, I think Thor the Dark World is the only MCU movie I've never finished. David Patterson, do you play Animal Crossing? No. David Patterson, if New Mutants is bad, I will be furious because we had to wait so long. That's the history kind of these movies that aren't very good though, so I don't think anyone's promised it's going to be amazing. So unless you're a fan of the actual comic book, I don't know if there's too much of a reason to be terribly offended. David Patterson, which year in the 2010s was the best for movies and the worst for movies? I don't really. It's tough to say just off the top of my head because you have to just think through so many different things. Like 2010 seemed to have a lot of good stuff. 2012 had a couple of big things. 2014 seemed to be really good. But I just couldn't do that off the top of my head because you're trying to think through a ton of different movies and a whole decade's worth of movies and try to think through which movie year did they come out. So I don't think I could do that. Rich Reviews, how would you pitch a Magic the Gathering film? I don't know. I'd have to know more about the mythology to be able to pitch one. There's not an obvious way to pitch it. Otherwise, we already would have had the movie because you have your deck of cards. Everyone has their different things like that, but it's not character based. And movies are character based. That's what you need to have a character you connect with. So that makes it really tricky. And if you did something corny like it's bookended by people in the real world playing the game, that sounds terrible. So I don't have one that immediately comes to mind. Gamer X9000, you forgot the DC Universe in your streaming service ranking. I didn't really forget it. I just didn't. It said top streaming services ranked. I wouldn't call it a top streaming service. I mean, I didn't have Crackle on there. I didn't have Tubi. I didn't have the Crunchyroll. I didn't have the horror one. There's a lot more streaming services out there that I could have put in there. I didn't put HBO. It's not. I wouldn't call that forgetting. That's just saying that it's not entirely exhaustive of everything out there that nobody has it, or limited people have it. If they're niche. I mean, one about only DC stuff is very niche. One only about anime, very niche. One only about horror, niche, not super niche. And so then, what are the big ones? What are the ones that have a lot of stuff that are kind of out there, or just launching, tied to a major brand? So maybe I shouldn't have included Apple Plus because it's new. Not a ton of people have it. It's tied to a major brand. People are talking about it. Whereas I just like even the nature of the DC one, like half of it's about comic books. I get just literal comics, reading comics. It's not just about movies and TV stuff. It's about comic books. So I just kind of perceive of it a little bit different in what it is. David Patterson, last time I didn't watch a movie in one sitting was when I watched Man of Steel in the fall of 2018. Richard Hughes, have you seen the Bourne spinoff series Treadstone on USA Network? I've seen 4 or 5 episodes. I don't remember if it was they only had 4 or 5 that were free and then we ran out of that, or if it was something else. But there was some complication in watching it that we just kind of went, okay, we've enjoyed this enough that if it was easy to keep watching, we would. But we haven't enjoyed it enough that now that we have to take steps to keep watching, that we want to take steps to keep watching. Bryce Bailey, why don't you like found footage movies? The obvious reasons, they're inherently not cinematic. They're inherently have to be kind of slower paced and a little bit an odder experience. You have to like, it's very much a specific acquired taste because you're watching it from this camera, someone moving their camera around. And so there's it's a lot of shaky cam because someone's walking, or it's a lot of shots on a tripod. So, inherently that you either like that and it's like you're really there in the room, or you don't. So there's no secret to it. It's just the inherent nature of it is something that is not as interesting or as cinematic to me. There hasn't been the one that's been like, oh man, this is just, well, there have been certain ones that I've liked, but as a genre, it's not at all something that I rush out to go see. David Patterson, do you consider Joker a psychological horror movie similar to what Get Out was? I don't think I would call it a horror movie. Maybe psychological thriller comic book movie. I don't think I would call it horror, though. There are some horrifying moments, but I just don't think it falls under the category of horror to me. I think it would have to go spend more time on the killing aspect than it does. And it's much more about the mind shattering. And so you get some killing along the way, but you're not It doesn't feel like a horror movie to me. Majestic Demon, which movie that you've seen do you think has the best practical effects? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to even answer the question because an explosion is a practical effect. So there's a movie with an explosion. It looks amazing. So I just Jurassic Park has practical effects, a lot of practical effects. But it has CGI. So I certainly don't have an answer to that. Like that's why I haven't done a video like what movie has the best effects. That's tough to answer because best effects isn't like a single thing to say because there's all kinds of practical effects that you don't know they're there. So that's a great effect. And there's all sorts of ones that are very ambitious that you can tell you're looking at effect, but it's ambitious. Okay, well, it's more ambitious, but how do you compare the two? Dave Patterson, last year in October, I decided to watch The Dark Knight 5 times in 5 days. I might try to do that with Inception soon, since I only have seen it 7 times so far. Majestic Demon, I don't know if I have it on Netflix in America, but have you watched or heard of the animated show Fast and Furious Spy Racers? I've heard of it. I haven't really watched it. I've ironically put it on to tease my wife, but we haven't actually watched any of it. David Patterson, in December, I told my dad that Rise of the Skywalker box office numbers at the time about 200 million. And he said, oh, so people are liking it, but it's not a blockbuster. 75% of that was wrong. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is kind of a weird take. See, here 200 million people like it, but it's not a blockbuster. It's not an end game. It wasn't an end game number. 200 million is absolutely a blockbuster debut. It's an insanely good number. It's just not a good number based off of how much anticipation in theory there was, or there should have been. When you can compare it to Endgame, and you go 150 million less than Endgame, that's not a good sign. 50 million less than Force Awakens, that's not a good sign. 25 million less than Last Jedi. You see the trajectory going down. And so, but yeah, Star Wars is also kind of graded on its own different curve. So it could mean all kinds of different stuff. All right. Looks like our last question on here. Gamer Max 9000. Okay, thank you. That was most of my questions for today. I had some Arrowverse questions, but I know you and the Arrowverse aren't getting along right now. That is true. Yeah, I'm a little bit burned on Arrowverse. Pretty burned on. I haven't watched anything Arrowverse since the Arrow finale. And I want to catch up on Flash. Need to catch up on Flash, but I'm not in a hurry to do that either. So frustrating since I've had a lot of good times with Arrowverse, and then I've got a lot of frustrations with him. Anyway, talk to you guys next Saturday. Yeah, there you go. Talk to you next Saturday.